Oh dear, something had obviously upset Hattie, but what could it be? At that very moment the doorbell rang, ding dong, and Adam and Calvin remembered they had invited Billy Blooming round for tea. Wednesday, sweethearts. Well, a girl's M-line's got to show some respect for the midweek. Nishty Gilder, think Bet Davis in Little Foxes. Oh, but your auntie's had a long day on her laddies, so off with the slingbacks, vogue me up, and mine's a Vera. Billy, from time to time, had employment as a spirit medium, and so it was he who had predicted and indeed facilitated at his arrival in Adam and Calvin's lives. Perhaps Billy could explain these strange, phantasmical transgressions. As Adam and Calvin sat round a large pot of Earl Grey tea, with that accompanying large gin for Billy, the homely couple began to tell their guest what had happened and their suspicions as to the offender. And I say, began, for they never completed their testimony. You see, just as Calvin was pointing out the very neat stitching between the lips of Charles Hawtrey and Bernie Breslau, a more incongruous couple one cannot imagine, the bra on the plastic model of Barbara Windsor suddenly, and seemingly of its own free will, flew off, and up into the air. The novelty plaything had been given pride of place in the centre of the kitchen table, but now the model was semi-naked, and so the arms of Miss Windsor reached across her chest to protect her modesty. Meanwhile, the spinning brazier hovered about, as if deciding where to land, and eventually chose the top of Barbara's head. Yet the bra continued in its tailspin, and the cups, though not designed for this usage, became as if the blades of a helicopter, and as a result the whole of body of Miss Windsor rose into the air like an ascending goddess and began to fly and dart about the room. Billy clapped and cheered at this remarkable psychical phenomenon, having right there in front of his eyes. Oh, Duchess Gloria, so very bold. Not since Mother's Lungo chats with Mary Queen of Scots, brought to a premature end by an unfortunate incident with a meat cleaver, did I regard her such wonderments. Don't encourage her, said Adam firmly. Hattie has been very mischievous, added Calvin. Oh, but observe her, Ducky, how she's making Barbara Windsor flutter about like a little sparrow in charper of a nest. However, the couple were more interested in why it was that Hattie had suddenly taken on these poltergeistian tendencies.
I had stayed in the cabinet room after the meeting to look over the latest trade figures, which were not at all encouraging, when suddenly I heard a voice. At first, I thought it was the Trade Secretary returning to discuss the numbers, but on glancing up I discovered, standing over me, none other than Herbert Asquith.
My darling Venetia,
he said, taking my arm.
Do I find you reading one of my passionate love letters?
Now, the private lives of politicians have never interested me in the slightest, but it was common knowledge that Asquith, who had been Prime Minister in the Edwardian era, kept a mistress called Venetia Patricia Stanley, and clearly this ghostly Herbert thought I was she. I hoped that by closing my eyes the phantom would disappear, and it did, only when I opened them, in its place was a prostrate William Gladstone. Those Victorian sideburns were unmistakable, flagellating himself in his underdrawers.
Tempt me not with your body. Cover your bosom, madam. You are the lady of the night, lost to the devil, but I will save you.
It is a historical fact that Gladstone often brought prostitutes back to Downing Street in the hope of saving them from their shameful lives. However, though the neckline of my dress was a little lower than usual, for the day was somewhat warm, one does not expect, when one is leader of Her Majesty's government, to be taken for a floozy. There are those who might think I should have been flattered, for Mr. Gladstone, looking, I must say, every single one of his 84 years, continued to stare at my upper half, whipping his hindquarters as if they were some poor horse on Derby Day. I said to him, as firmly as I could, "Would you kindly stop thrashing yourself into a frenzy while gawping at my bosoms?" So preoccupied was I by the apparition, I hadn't noticed that as I said these words, the Trade Secretary had indeed returned, and, by an unfortunate coincidence, had his hands deep inside his trouser pockets. I cannot say for certain exactly what he was doing. Clearly Mr. Gladstone was invisible to him, but the minister immediately offered his profuse apologies, and went on to say that he had a secret devotion for me, and, if fortune were to smile, would consider leaving his wife. What a ridiculous notion! In the next reshuffle I had no choice but to put him on the naughty step by sending him to Northern Ireland.